happen if your neighbor gave you something to protect and it was stolen or lost? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Exodus chapter 22. We're going to be reading from verses 7 to 15. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Exodus 22, beginning at verse 7. If a man delivers to his neighbor money or articles to keep, and it is stolen out of the man's house, if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, then the master of the house shall be brought to the judges to see whether he has put his hand into his neighbor's goods. For any kind of trespass, whether it concerns an ox, a donkey, a sheep, or clothing, or for any kind of lost thing which another claims to be his, the cause of both parties shall come before the judges, and whomever the judges condemn shall pay double to his neighbor. If a man delivers to his neighbor a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any animal to keep, and it dies, is hurt, or driven away, no one seeing it, then an oath of the Lord shall be between them both, that he has not put his hand into his neighbor's goods. And the owner of it shall accept that, and he shall not make it good. But if, in fact, it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to the owner of it. If it is torn to pieces by a beast, then he shall bring it as evidence, and he shall not make good what was torn. And if a man borrows anything from his neighbor, and it becomes injured or dies, the owner of it not being with it, he shall surely make it good. If its owner was with it, he shall not make it good. If it was hired, it came for its hire. In chapters 21 through 23, we have been dealing with God's judgments concerning application of his laws. These judgments would be contained in the book of the covenant and would thus be part of the law of Moses. They would also help the judges that were set up in Exodus 18 properly judge the people. We've had God's judgments concerning servants, concerning violence, whether by man or animal, and concerning theft. Verses 7 to 15 deals with what would happen when someone entrusts a neighbor with their goods. Up until verse 13, we're dealing with what would happen if a person asked someone to take care of their goods, while verses 14 and 15 deals with what would happen when someone borrowed someone else's goods. So, according to verse 7, if a person delivered their money or goods for another to protect, and he was stolen, if the thief was found, the thief was to pay double. This would be consistent with verse 4. It can likely be assumed that if the situation described in verse 7 was consistent with the situation of verse 1, then the level of restitution would be consistent with verse 1 instead of verse 4. What would happen, though, if the thief was not found? Then a case would need to be brought before the judges. This is what Moses would have had to deal with before Jethro gave him the advice to set up lower court judges. The purpose for bringing the neighbor to court is to see if it was in fact the neighbor who stole the goods and sold them, or whether he was innocent. We're not exactly told how this case would proceed, for verse 9 deals with a slightly different situation. It would be safe to conclude, though, that it would proceed in a similar fashion to what we read of in verses 9 to 12. If the person would take an oath to swear that he had not stolen the goods, and the court believed him, he would be declared innocent. But if he was found guilty, he would make restitution to his neighbor. If the person was found innocent, would the neighbor have to then suffer the loss? It appears so, unless, of course, the thief was later caught. Verse 9 deals with a situation where a person entrusts his good to his neighbor and then accuses him of stealing it. In verse 8, no accusation of the neighbor was made, but the situation had to be tested anyway. In verse 9, however, a specific accusation was made in order to receive restitution from his neighbor. Both parties would appear before the judge, who would then decide the case. If the neighbor is convicted, he will pay double to the original owner. However, if the neighbor is acquitted, then the original owner would pay double the value of what was accused of being stolen for harming the reputation of his neighbor. This situation would not only prevent theft, but it would also prevent slander. Verses 10 to 13 deals with the situation where an animal or animals are given to a neighbor for safekeeping, and those animals die, are hurt, or are driven away while nobody is watching. In this case, the neighbor is again taken to court to determine if restitution is required. If the neighbor was no party to the disappearance, he is to take an oath of the Lord. The owner was to accept that oath as being the truth, then no restitution is paid. One would hope that someone taking this oath would be telling the truth, but if he was not, he may have gotten away with something here on this earth, but if left unforgiven, he would have to deal with a God that knows all later, for such would be sin. If, however, the animal was stolen from him, in other words, from his power, then he was to make restitution. The exception would be if the animal was torn into pieces by another animal. This would be proven by the presentation of the dead animal to the court, at which point, if it is proven, no restitution is made. Verses 14 and 15 deals with borrowing. If a neighbor borrows an animal from someone, and the animal gets injured or dies, not within its presence of the original owner, then restitution is to be made. However, if this occurs in the presence of his original owner, no restitution is to be made, because the owner should have protected his property. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Exodus 22, verses 16 to 24, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.